Greetings all, and welcome back to Lucas Brews. In today's video, we're going to be finishing up the 1/72nd scale P-47D Thunderbolt Razorback from Academy that's part of the 70th anniversary of D-Day set. So I've done two previous videos, one covering the painting of this kit and another covering the assembly. So in today's video, we're going to be focusing on weathering, and at the end of the video, I'll give my honest opinion on this kit. The first step of weathering the model for me is to apply some metal chipping. To do this, I use a small brush to dry brush some Tamiya XF16 flat aluminium onto some of the areas that are more likely to have the paint removed from wear and tear. These include areas that are exposed directly to anything that the aircraft might fly into, or even just wind resistance, such as the front of the cowling, the leading edges of the wings, and the leading edges of the tail and horizontal stabilizers. Parts that are often moving, such as the cow flaps and the flaps themselves, and areas where the maintenance crew or even the pilots might scratch a bit of paint off if they were, say, walking on an area or opening up some panels for regular maintenance. I find the best method for making sure your dry brushes look realistic is to make sure the paint is pretty dry when you apply it onto the model, otherwise the paint starts to flow and creates really soft shapes, whereas metal scratches tend to be quite jagged and random. I have been told my weathering tends to be a little bit heavy-handed, and that probably is the case. However, if you do want to use this technique, you can soften it up later by applying a coat of whatever colour you've applied the metal chipping over the top of. I was quite happy with how the P-47 looked without doing another coat of the base paint over the top, but it is a good little trick. I paint the pilot's headrest Vallejo chocolate brown, and then apply some grease effects by using some Tamiya Paneliner scent on the propeller spinner hub, along the edges of the cow flaps and the control surfaces, and also on the landing gear. I apply a fair bit into the recesses for the control surfaces, and then I'll apply some more streaking backwards on them. I also streak it backwards from the landing gear bays, and also from the engine cowling. A lot of these moving parts would get a lot of grease and oil, and it would streak backwards if a little bit leaked out during operation from the airflow. You'll notice even when using the thinned down panel liner that the effect is quite strong, so after it is dried I go along with a fine brush and streak it more with some Tamiya X20 thinners. I wanted to make a stronger effect around the engine and the cow flaps, since the P-47's radial engine would leak a lot of oil, so to do this I got out a fine brush and applied some Tamiya weathering powders to the areas where the oil is likely to leak backwards and streak from. These water-based pigments made a really nice dull kind of effect, and almost looked like the aircraft had been a little bit stained by the oil. However, I wanted to have some more stronger and prominent oil streaks. To do this, I got out some Tamiya X1 Gloss Black and thinned it with a bit of thinners, and then used a very fine brush to apply some streaks coming out of some of the areas where I wanted it to be a bit more heavy. These included obviously the cowling and the edges of the cow flaps, and also on the control hinges. I then used a cotton tip damped in a little bit of X20 thinners to soften down the effect and drag it backwards a little bit more. The building up of several layers created a really nice effect in my opinion, and after I dabbed a bit of black powder onto the muzzles to create some gun smoke, it was time for the exhaust system, and oh boy. Since the P-47 was intended to be a high altitude interceptor, the aircraft is built basically around its radial engine and a massive supercharging system, which is completely beyond my level of mechanical understanding, and looks a lot like someone ripped out some of the ventilation from a Coles shopping centre and strapped it to the back of a radial engine. Rather than having direct exhaust ports from the engine, there are three areas where there are exhausts, one behind the oil cooler, one for the supercharger at the bottom of the aircraft, and then one for the intercooler. The intercooler doesn't seem to have any streaks coming back from it in any of the pictures I've found. It's hard to get pictures of the supercharger's exhaust because it's so far behind and at the bottom of the aircraft, but in the ones I've seen there does appear to be a fair bit coming out the back. The main one to focus on, however, is the one located behind the oil cooler shutter doors. This appears to have the most of the streaking, and in closer photos I've seen there appears to be a sort of bare metal panel on P-47s running back from the exhaust. And interestingly, in some photos you can see that there's exhaust streaking and also what appears to be some paint melted away on the inner landing gear bay doors. With the research complete, I began my exhaust system creation by using some Tamiya X33 bronze to paint the exhaust pipes, and some Tamiya X11 chrome to paint the bare metal behind the exhaust. To create the exhaust stains, I used some of the black Tamiya weathering powder, dabbing it onto the area behind the exhaust on both the main exhaust behind the engine and also the cooler, and also onto the landing gear bay doors. I streaked a little bit of the rust colour on some of the areas where I'd previously done some grease for some added effect, and then dabbed a little bit of white onto the middle of the exhaust area to add some burnt effect. I created a little bit of build-up of dirt using the weathering powders, sand, mud and light sand colours on the landing gear wheels themselves, streaking backwards from the landing gear bays and the tail wheel, and into some of the panels and on the area where the pilots walk to get into the aircraft. I kept the effect relatively subtle on the upper surface of the aircraft, with most of the weathering focused on the wheels to give the impression the aircraft might have taxied a little bit on some dirt. With the weathering complete, the last accessories I added were the lights. For the landing lights, I used a little bit of metallic metal and glued it into place with some deluxe material, a rocket odorless glue, and then glued the small clear part over the top of it. For the navigation lights, I painted them first X11 Tamiya Chrome, and then X25 Clear Green and X27 Clear Red on each respective side. And with that, my Academy 1/72nd scale P-47D Razorback Thunderbolt was finally completed. So I quite enjoyed having a build of this kit, and it was also good to practice a few different weathering techniques, especially with the building up of the oil streaks on the cowling, and I'm really happy with how it all turned out. The kit itself is really quite excellent, although it's definitely a lot more simple than something like the Tamiya P-47. Overall, the details are still really good. The only issue I have with this kit is the propeller. Trying to fit that to the engine and the cowling is a real challenge, and you kind of can't really follow the instructions on that bit. But otherwise, it's a really solid kit, goes together well, not really any gaps or imperfections, and it's not too expensive either. The individual aircraft retail for less than $20 AUD in Australia, and as for the double set for D-Day 70th Anniversary, I think it's since been discontinued. However, it retailed originally for around about $50, which is, for two aircraft, is, yeah, not too bad at all. I'd definitely recommend this kit for beginners. Besides having the fiddly engine, it's really easy to put together. For people with a lot more experience, it's a good little test bed for techniques, and you can detail it up quite easily. It's probably also worth pointing out the set comes with some additional rockets, bombs and fuel tank options. However, I didn't really feel like spending extra time in putting them together, but they're included in this kit. I do like all of Academy's other 1/72nd scale kits, although I'd have to say this is probably one of their best in their little 72nd scale Warbird series. So that's it for this video. I do hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed making this kit. If you did, please be sure to leave a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. And feel free to leave any questions and constructive criticism in the comments down below. I do like to receive both. And a big shout out to my patrons for helping me fund buying these kits, and also to Riles Hubbard, my good friend from the Queensland Air Museum, who let me borrow his photo booth and also helped me take some of the photos of this kit. So thanks a lot for that, mate. I'd also like to give a shout out to my place of work, Tectonic Hobbies, the local hobby shop on the Sunshine Coast, where we stock Academy and all of the products that I've used in this video. That's it for now, but thanks again, and until the next video, model on!